people who died were men,
Hmm.
but there were women there who had connections to these men, who had their apartments destroyed, who had lost everything, and yet they're left out of the historic record.
Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where our guest today is Lisa C., and we're going to be talking about her new novel, Daughters of the Sun and Moon, her 11th novel, if I have that correct. I think it's 11. 3 years ago, I read Lisa's last book, Lady Tan's Circle of Women, and I declared it Lisa's best book. Well, I love Daughters of the Sun and Moon just as much, so let's call this a tie. All right, we're going in with a tie. This book is an Indie Next pick, a Library Reads Hall of Fame selection, and it's going to be one of my Book Reporter Bets On selections. The book has already garnered so many accolades, and I'm speaking with Lisa before the book comes out, so we don't have our review yet. So I'm going to share some praise from others with you. Publishers Weekly said it's stirring. C builds a taut story from precise details and offers an inspiring vision of female resilience. Library Journal says C offers a stunning piece of historical fiction based in truth. It will touch readers with the characters' resilience, that word comes up again, heroism, and devoted friendship. And with that praise, welcome, Lisa. It's so great to see you.
So great to see you, really, just wonderful.
So, you always have interesting stories about how you came to write the books that you write. So, what was the inspiration this time?
No, I really feel like it was a couple of different things. As you know, I do think about books for a very long time before I decide this is the one. I first learned about the massacre 30 years ago when I was working on my first book on Gold Mountain. And there's like a paragraph in that book about the massacre, but then, moved on, did other things. And then a few years ago, I was invited to be, by the mayor, to be on this advisory board to think about building a memorial for the to commemorate the massacre. And so once I was involved with that, this all kind of bubbled up to the surface. But there is also one other thing that is a lot older than 30 years. So when my great grandparents were first married and they lived in Sacramento, my great grandfather was Chinese, my great grandmother was white. It was against the law for Chinese and white people to marry in this state. And they were looking for a place that would be safe for them and for their children. And so this was after the 1871 massacre. And one of the things that happened here in Los Angeles was, this was international news. All around the world, it pushed the Chicago fire off the front pages. And it was a huge embarrassment for the city that was just beginning a land boom. And so city fathers kind of erased what had happened off the physical map and tried to sell Los Angeles as a place of opportunity, good weather, um, good health, and opportunity.
Oh,
These are all selling points even today,
they
right?
are. They are. I was
They
going to say
are.
this again.
So
Yeah,
this was like
still.
the very beginning of those selling points. And my great grandparents bought it because they felt that they could be safe here. Because one of the things that city fathers said was, this will never happen again. Of
Mhm.
course, it turned out to be wrong
Right.
in that way, but it was something that my great grandparents bought. And so when I was a little girl, my family had this Chinese antique store. And sometimes my grandmother would walk me over to the historic core of Los Angeles. If you've ever been there, it's where Alvera Street is, and they're the oldest hotel and the oldest firehouse, and they're all around this plaza. And when I was a little girl, and even today, there was this one kind of vacant lot, a slope with grass on it. And it was there that my great grandparents had their store.
Oh, wow.
And so, it was long gone. And my grandparents lived there. My father had his 16th birthday living in the basement there. My grandfather had his restaurant there. So my family was on that corner for about 50 years. That is a literal stone's throw. I could throw the stone
Oh.
to where the massacre began. And yet my grandmother never mentioned it. No one ever talked about that. But I I just I don't know. There was something all the way to today when I am on that piece of land, and there are lots of tourists there, and it's right by Union Station. There are people getting on the metro, getting on trains, but nobody knows what happened there. And the way I guess I think of it is like the blood soaked into the soil,
Hmm.
but nobody knows it.
Nobody knows what's going on. In this book, Los Angeles is this dusty little Pueblo town. I mean, doesn't even feel like a city.
Uh,
It feels like just this place where, the cowboy's going to come out any minute. But
yeah.
that's not what's going on. So you researched this for On Gold Mountain and you explored the massacre. What do you like about looking back at history? Because you've done that. You've gone far back, and
Yeah.
here it's something that I knew nothing about. And what spurs you to do that?
Well, I mean, I know I've said this before, but I am interested in history that's lost, forgotten, and deliberately covered up. And
Hmm.
a lot of that, just because of my own family background, has to do with Chinese American experience. But it also has a lot to do with women.
Hmm.
So, we tend to learn history, I think of as like the front line of history, the wars, the dates, the generals, the presidents, the prime ministers. But if you take one step back, who's there? It's women, it's children, it's families. And
Hmm.
they're there every single step of the way. But their stories aren't often told. And so here's, an example of something that, the people who died were men,
Hmm.
but there were women there who had connections to these men, who had their apartments destroyed, who had lost everything,
Hmm.
and yet they're left out of the historic record.
Yeah.
And so I just feel this kind of compulsion actually. And then once I start, it's like an obsession. And I just want to find everything I can. To me, it's kind of like a treasure hunt.
Hmm.
I never know what I'm going to find.
Right.
And like really like, I'm a pirate and I'm out there looking, and then there's that little piece of gold. Or I'm a miner, shifting, going through in the creek, and
Mhm.
oh, there comes this little nugget.
Yeah.
And I love to find that stuff. And I think in some ways, the harder it is to find, the more I love it.
Yeah. The deeper you've got to go, the deeper you have to
Yeah.
go to get to the real story. Did you always see this being told through the eyes of three women? Was it ever two? Was it ever just one? Was it always going to be these three women?
I knew that there would be three because I wanted to tell three very different stories. What I didn't know was how I would do it. Would it all be from one person's point of view, and you'd meet the other people through that one
Right.
person?
Right.
As you know, I ended up telling it from three different perspectives. So maybe I should just say a little bit
Yeah.
about these
Do
three
that.
women.
Yeah.
So these are three women inspired by four real women. So the first was a young girl, 15 years old, who was brought here in an arranged marriage to a much, much older merchant. He was described in the local press of the day as being hideously ugly.
Mm.
So she wasn't here for very long before she was kidnapped and held captive for about 6 months.
Wow.
And there were people then, and scholars even today, who believe that her kidnapping is like the initial spark for the violence that's going to happen many months in the future. The next one was the wife of the Chinese doctor, and Dr. Tong was real, his wife was real. There wasn't a whole lot of information about her, but the little bits, they intrigued me. So
Hmm.
one of the things is that she had a little white poodle.
Right.
And I just kept thinking, I'm still to this day, like, how did this woman
Yeah.
have a little white poodle in Los Angeles? Like, how did it get here?
I
I just want to
agree.
know how that little white poodle got here.
I
And
agree.
so, for me to take these little tiny bits of things. She was the first woman to file a lawsuit, Chinese woman to file a lawsuit against the city. So, there's that historic record. It's not followed up. So, I wanted to find out what happened.
Mhm.
And then the last one is inspired by two real women who were sold by their families in China, brought here, and then sold into prostitution. And
Mhm.
this is not long after the Civil War. The slavery has been outlawed.
Right.
It's in our Constitution, the 13th Amendment, but there was one exception, and it had to do with the sale and ownership of Chinese women in the state of California. And so, in real life, these two women, from the moment they got here, they did everything they could to escape and find freedom.
Hmm.
So I took, the real things that happened to them to create Petal. And I know I shouldn't say this because, you've got to love all your characters equally, kind of like your kids,
Right, right, right.
but she is my favorite character. I just love her.
She's this bodacious kind of character. She's the one that's just going to, she's actually, it feels like the gutsiest one of all. And she's in a position where one is precious. I
Right.
see Dove is precious. Petal is going to get herself out. And Moon has got a lot of scars about the
Right.
way her foot binding didn't work as a child. She doesn't walk well. So she has more, she's more not nervous, but she's more discontented about other things. This one is just fire away. This is what I'm going to
Yeah, just get me out of here. She's
do
and
now.
she has such persistence. And
Mhm.
because these real women who she's inspired by had this persistence.
Mhm.
And of course it's all in the surviving court records, because every time one of them would run away, she'd be caught and hauled back into court. And so to look at those original documents, all handwritten, because they didn't have typewriters yet, and to see what these women were doing and how they persisted.
And wanting to buy their freedom. How much
Yeah,
more money am I going to owe Tong that I can get out of here? How
yeah.
much money am I owing the head man to be able to leave? It's always like that. I also think the idea of Petal and Dove being sold by their families indicates what's going on in China. So was there a shortage of what was the reason that they were was feeding into the poverty at that time? Too many
There
people?
were actually quite a few things going on in China at that time. The Taiping Rebellion, about 50 million people died during that. There were that this was followed by a period of terrible drought, and
Hmm.
so that brought on starvation, but also famines,
Hmm.
and it was just a very tough time. And that is really kind of not the height, but the real beginning of immigration, Chinese immigration here.
Hmm.
So, of course, it starts earlier than that with the discovery of gold, and then with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. So, in this novel, the Transcontinental Railroad has been finished,
Hmm.
just barely finished, and people are still coming. But they're really, this is actually something about immigration today. It's like the push and pull factors, right? The things that push you out of your country: hunger, no opportunity, poverty, maybe religious persecution, and then the things that pull you to the new country, opportunity, safety, a better life for your
Better life.
children,
Yeah.
all of those things. They persist to today.
Right, right, right. You know what? I love the way the women orbit each other in their different worlds. Moon works with her husband, the doctor. Dove is the second wife to this man that she is like, oh my gosh, is this the one I got picked for? And Petal is thrust into prostitution. So you're known about, focusing on the female friendship, often with women of different classes. That's
Right.
one of the hallmarks of your book. And what drew you to do these particular ways of life? It's just that you knew that this is the kind of people you would have found in Los Angeles at that time. Someone who was more educated, somebody who was brought there, and somebody who was brought there to be a prostitute.
Right. Well, again, they're based on three real women.
Yeah,
So there were 34 women, Chinese women here at the time, and
34.
these were based on some of them. And I I thought that was really intriguing. And also, this is different than my other books where they're often two friends. It's a lifelong friendship. and they're very connected. I remember when I was writing Snowflower and the Secret Fan, my editor, when we were editing it, he said, nothing can happen to Lily without Snowflower being there.
Yeah.
Well, this book was completely different.
Yeah.
You know, the three women are only together something like four times, the three
Hmm.
of them together
Hmm.
in the same room four times for like the first 200 pages.
Hmm.
So they're I I think it's Moon who says this, that they were like planets orbiting, but every once in a while they would kind of line up.
Yeah. The
And that they
intersect.
were on these very different paths that ordinarily they should never have met each other. And yet they kept being pulled together, on like gravity.
Yeah. They're different situations. Loneliness and longing is something that comes up again and again throughout this book. And I feel like few people in this book are rooted in a place that they want to be. And they're all shrouded with uncertainty. And we know what that does to people. And I see you tackling how to survive and even thrive in that kind of world. And that's where you take your characters, is you're not just going to survive, you're going to do better. Am I on the right track there of what you're giving these women?
I think so. I like to think so. I do I I do believe in the goodness of humanity overall.
Hmm.
And I also really, just from my own life experience, have seen, whether for myself, but other people, when bad things happen, what do you do? Do you rise to the occasion? Do you fail? Do you curl up in a ball? Do you go out there and fight? There are all kinds of ways. And I actually was thinking, weirdly enough, about this morning. We had the terrible fires here in
Yeah.
Los Angeles about a year and a half ago, and I know so many people who lost their homes. I mean, I stopped counting at 78, and the you
Think I lost you in a second. Wait, you're frozen. I don't know what's going on. Hold on one second. Let me grab a cord. Hold on one second. I'm trying to figure out. It's like frozen. Okay.
yeah, it did freeze.
Okay. Do you want to say it's
But you
78?
froze in a lovely way. You
Frozen
froze
in
in
a lovely way. Maybe we could talk about if it stopped at 78, because I think that's where you were when you froze. You stopped counting at 78.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I stopped counting at 78 how many people that we knew who had lost their homes. And this is everything except for what they happened to be wearing when they jumped in the car. Maybe they were out, we have friends who are out doing errands
Right.
and hadn't and then that was it. There was
Hmm.
nothing to go back to, just what they had on them. And what I have seen is, of course, a devastating and a lot of depression and a lot of, overwhelming sadness and all the red tape, of course, of trying to put your life back together, find a place to live, buy socks. I mean, all of it.
Hmm.
Um, but this incredible strength that people have in them when bad things happen.
Hmm.
And I, I that's something, it really inspires me, to see that, and how people pull together
Hmm. Yeah.
in these bad circumstances. And that's what I felt with these women. And you know what? It's interesting now that I think about it, because of course I was writing this during the fires. I mean, I
Right.
evacuated with the manuscript.
Right. I remember that.
I
Yeah.
had that picture on social media of like all, the manuscript sitting in my son's hallway when we had found, had to leave. And I don't know. I guess we do live in precarious times,
Hmm.
but also the way people do pull together and the strength that people get from each other.
Right. They're not just pulling together. It's like, oh, wait, how can I help? What can I do? And who can I go to at this time where I'm really sad, when I'm
Yeah.
really
And I think
support group?
sometimes when the worst thing happens, you're not actually, you're supposed to be brave
Right.
and to be there for friends when they really are not feeling that.
Yeah, when you're just saying, "Oh my gosh," I was thinking about it during the holidays when you would normally go up to the attic and get the decorations, and there's no attic to go back to, and there's
Exactly.
completely starting over your life. And then it's also, what is that place going to be? What is it going to
Right.
be going forward? It had all these interesting homes. Is it now
And
model A, B, C, D?
well, and also the idea of home. So I think that's very much a theme in Daughters of the Sun and Moon,
Yes.
is what is home? And for immigrants, that whole idea of assimilation, that's a word that people don't like all that much anymore. But
Mhm.
when does this new place become home?
Right.
How do you make it be your home? If you've lost and in many ways, these women have lost everything, right?
Yes.
By being sent abroad in the way that they are. That how do you say, this is where I'm planting my roots. This is where I'm going to have home. And whatever home means, it might just be a room.
Mhm.
But when you decide, to me, I guess because, we are a nation of immigrants, but my own family, a lot of immigrants. So that idea of, when do you say I'm American? When do
Mhm.
you say you've made that transition?
When is that moment that you feel you belong and this is your safe space? And
Right. And then
couple
what
that.
do you still bring with you? Food, maybe, maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's Chinese New Year. What do you bring with you, and what are those traditions from your home country that you're going to hang on to?
Right. What foods are you going to look forward to serving on certain holidays? And you may celebrate different holidays from everybody else, but they're still special holidays. The story's always building towards the night of horrors. We're always edging that way. And we know from the jacket copy this is coming. We know exactly where they're going. But the character setup till then makes the actions of that evening more profound and personal because you're seeing people that are killed that are associated with the three characters who come to know. And so much of our reading about history is just facts. And what
Right.
I feel like is what you were doing here is personalizing it. What do you like about being a storyteller that so beautifully blends the fact and the fiction? Because you're bringing this horrific event to light to us, but you're putting it through the eyes of these people.
Well, I think that's exactly it, to be in their shoes. And I go back to when I was first starting with On Gold Mountain. So we're talking 30 years ago, and I had come across a quote. It was something like, history doesn't happen to people. It doesn't, happen to people. It happens to us. Like, just this sort of generic. And or the idea of, we can think of all the books and all the movies that have been written about the Holocaust, but
Hmm.
what's the one we all know and remember? The Diary of Anne Frank.
Hmm.
One girl, her family. And it takes that whole history and makes it very personal. And so again, for On Gold Mountain, I did use a quote from Wallace Stegner as the epigraph. I don't think I have it memorized perfectly, but this is the gist. Fooling around in the papers my grandparents, especially my grandmother, left behind, I get glimpses of lives close to mine. I'd like to live in their clothes a while. And
Mm.
I didn't know when I used that for On Gold Mountain that idea of living in their clothes a while would be something, just at the center of how I approach writing about these characters all the way to today. That I
Yeah,
just want to be, in their shoes. And then if I can do that, then I'm with them. And then hopefully the readers are with them too.
and I think you spend a lot of time educating us about things and people that we may not know about in a national way. Okay, fine, you know about this in LA. And it was interesting, this is all happening
No,
on the
people
other
didn't know about it here.
side.
They really don't.
Well, what's happening is on the other side of the Civil War, which ended in 1865. So we've got this battle against another class in 1871. And this is something I never knew about. It was done by a white and Latino mob. They decided they were going to execute these Chinese people. And I feel like that this is part of the shaping of America that needs to be taught because it goes back so far. Is it taught like in fourth grade, I feel like all around the country, you study your state and what happens there?
We never learned that here.
You
We
didn't.
never learned anything about it.
Interesting.
Nothing. And actually, you touched on something I think is kind of important, which is, Los Angeles only had 5,000 people, around 5,000. And there were all the, people, the leftover Spanish land grant and people from Mexico, because it was, had been Mexico, not that
Well,
further back. But and then people from all over the world. I mean, just literally all over the world. But one of the largest groups were people from the Deep South.
mm-hmm. Wow.
And, Los Angeles was the only state in the Union to send a regiment to fight on the side of the Confederacy.
Never knew that.
So, yeah, so,
Go ahead.
so there was some deep, again, advertising it as an open place, but there was some deep resentments and a lot of racism here, that can really be tied to a lot of the thought behind the Civil War.
Civil War, what was going on there? Are the horrors of that evening commemorated? Like, is there something that
A
happens?
few years ago, the Chinese American Museum here in Los Angeles started doing an annual memorial, or a memorial event. And then now there is an actual memorial is going to be built.
Wow.
The funds have been raised. They just need to break ground and get going on it. They'd like it to be finished by the time of the 2028 Olympics.
Oh, right, right, right. So then when it's there, there's that part of the history. As always, you do this extensive research for the book. I know you're into books, you whatever. Do you research as you're writing, or is it all pretty much done when you sit down? Do you pretty much know where you're?
I think I have everything done and everything I have this little bookcase there thing,
Yeah.
and that's where I keep most of the research right there or right here. So it's all just within arm's reach. I can just roll a couple inches either way. And when I start, I think I have everything. But invariably, stuff comes up that I don't know, and I have to stop everything and just, go down a rabbit hole. One of the things was how long did it take to go on the ferry from San Francisco to Los Angeles?
Ooh.
I knew how long it took to cross the Pacific. I knew how long it took to go on horseback. I knew how long it took on the stagecoach. But for some reason, finding the time schedule, I could see all the departure times, but not the arrival times for the ferry.
And it's like,
So
okay,
that turned out, I had to just that it ended up being hours and hours and hours.
like, is it a day? Is it half a day?
Yeah.
Are
You
you going
spend
to
is it one night,
Right. And it's those little details that'll be longer time on the ship with her brother, longer time of saying goodbye to people, longer time of
Exactly.
everything, which is always
Yeah,
really,
and what time do you arrive the next day? Is it morning? Is it 4 in the afternoon? And now you're at the port, but you still have to get to downtown Los Angeles and then how do you do that? Are you on a wagon? Are you in a stagecoach? Are you in a private little carriage? And all of those things take different amounts of time.
right.
I of course, right now I can't remember, but like how far can a horse walk in a day? Or in the case of Petal, who keeps running away, how far can she get
Mm.
in a day walking barefoot? And because I knew where she was caught. I knew when she would escape. I knew when she was caught from the record. But then I had to, how fast did she go?
Wow. I can picture you. Okay, let's run around the room. Let's see. Is my gait the same as hers? Let me figure it.
Exactly. And
Yes.
thinking from here to Santa Barbara, because that is one direction she goes, there's this one really tough hill that even in the car, it's like, but then when you get to the top, you see the Pacific and the mountains and everything, and it's beautiful. But I was thinking, okay, she's walked from downtown Los Angeles and now she has to go up that hill, and just how long that would take.
Yeah.
And but also just how beautiful it must have been at that time. I mean, there even now parts of that drive are pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and to be able to sit there and say freedom. All she's seeing is freedom ahead of her, besides what she's looking at. It's just, I'm getting away from a life I don't want to live. So, was she the one whose story, like, okay, she's the one precious woman. Is that one? Is that your, I can tell it's your favorite character. She's the one,
No,
Petal.
Petal, the one who
Yeah.
keeps escaping.
Yeah, that's
Dove is the one I think of as being precious, this
right.
precious little,
Yeah.
well, I actually, as you know, I wrote about her in the third person, kind of like from afar. And I was thinking about how so often people talk about, objectifying women,
Mm-hmm.
but she really was like an object.
Yes.
I mean, they, in the press, when she was kidnapped, they talked about, she was her husband's precious lamb. She was the, glittering jewel. She was, but never like this poor woman has been kidnapped. They
Right.
never, they just talked about her as some other thing.
Yeah.
And that even when she was kidnapped, um, and she's taken from courtroom to she's kidnapped, they catch her, they bring her back, she's taken to a courtroom, then kidnapped again, taken another courtroom. And my editor said, this is too many courtrooms. This is like too many judges, too many courtrooms. And I was like, but I want that because it really showed that she was like a package,
Yeah.
just being handed with no volition. She had no say in it.
Mm-mm.
And that, for me, for her, what I wanted was in the novel was for her to find a way to have choices in her life, to make those choices for herself and sort of move from being this little package that gets taught, passed around,
Right.
um, because she's so precious,
Mm-hmm.
being someone who can make decisions for herself.
So once again, you've got this precious with a character with a bound feet, like what we
Mhm.
bound foot. And we all know that as soon as you read that about that in a book, you immediately go and Google what's going on. When did the tradition of bind feet end? When was that over? Was
So it was really a process. The first time it was outlawed was in 1911 with the formation of the Republic of China.
okay.
But and it caught on pretty well in the big cities, but China is a very big country. A
Mhm.
lot of it was, deep in the countryside, and people weren't getting the news. And then when Mao took power in 1949, he issued another prohibition outlawing it. Um, I always hesitate to say anything good about him because he's responsible for millions upon millions of deaths, but he did do a lot of good things for women at the
Mhm.
beginning, and that was one of them. But same problem, how do you reach people out there in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah.
And so the area that I wrote about in Snowflower and the Secret Fan, they didn't hear that Mao had taken over the country. They didn't hear that foot binding was outlawed until 1952. So there were just some places where it lingered because they didn't hear. But there was also something else going on. And I've used these two examples for like 20 years, I think. It doesn't matter who's president. We've had a lot of different presidents. So it works for every president. Suppose tonight the president came on TV and said, from now on, women can no longer have pierced ears.
Hmm.
Well, it's not foot binding, but it is a physical thing. And some women would say, whatever the president says, I'll do. And some people would say, whatever this guy says, forget it. And then some would be like, forget the whole red state, blue state thing. I like my pierced ears. I'm not so willing to give them up. Suppose tonight the president came on TV and said, from now on, we're never again going to celebrate Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
Now, I do think you'd hear this huge sigh of relief that would go all the way across the country for all these women, like, oh, you don't have to make that meal again.
A turkey, never again with that turkey.
Never
Once a
again.
year, once a year
But,
we make it. Yeah.
but, then people would say, now, wait a minute. This is a uniquely American tradition. This is when our whole family comes together. We have traditions that are connected. Um, do you watch football all day on TV? Do you play touch football in the backyard? Or, like my family, you could count on Uncle Bob, and this is real, to drink too much and pass out in the mashed potatoes. Um, we have traditions around food,
Hmm.
how people make stuffing depending on where they live in the country. So people wouldn't be so willing to give it up just because the government said so.
Hmm.
So, it was a combination of reasons why it did linger, but really by the 1950s, it was over.
So there could be somebody today still alive. Yeah.
I think there are very few left.
Left. Yeah.
I can remember like 10 years ago, there were so many that were left, and China had finally closed the last factory that made bound foot shoes.
Wow. I don't know. It's completely interesting because I'm learning things, which I always do with your books. I think that's the interesting thing about the books is I come into something and I know I'm going to have a story about women. I know they're going to be a connection of friendship or some kindredship among the women, but I never know what they're going to be thrown up against. I never know what they're going to have to do. And, I think that the Night of Horrors changed things significantly better for those of Chinese descent in LA because it was, we're not going to do that again. And that was the impact on your great grandparents. So let's talk about that because they were living in San Francisco, but
Sacramento.
eventually they moved down. They moved to LA.
Right. Yeah, well, that's when we were at the beginning, I was
That's
talking
true.
about how they saw this,
Opportunity.
they bought the advertisement. They bought this idea that this was a safe place. Yes, opportunity and good health and sunshine and all that, but the idea that they would be safe.
Hmm.
And, and I think the city still has that reputation up to a point. But it's also true. We had the Watts riots, and
Hmm.
then after that, we said this will never happen again. And then after Rodney King, then everything that happened after after the trial. And so I think things get better for a while, and then people forget. Um, I I think we do repeat our mistakes. We don't learn from our mistakes, or we don't. Maybe we learn from our mistakes, but over time forget.
Or time for it.
Or the younger generation, or two or three generations go by and they don't really remember what happened back then.
And what is the way out? If you're not going to fight, if you're not going to march, if you're not going to do this,
Right.
then what do you do? What do you
Yes.
do? Because those are actions you take as a group. And how people don't think of another way to do it. They think of like, oh, a mass action is going to be the only way to do this, not sitting up and saying, well, what could we do to live together? It doesn't happen like that.
No,
Usually too much hate has built up at that point and it erupts.
that's right. Yeah.
And it's, that kind of a thing. Now, you have these great chapter titles throughout the entire book. Do you write those as you go or go back and do those?
They're most of them before I start, a lot of them have come from aphorisms, but also just maybe just a pretty phrase that I know I'm going to be using, or sometimes I don't, not 100% of the time do I have it, but by the time I finished a chapter, I know what that will be. The nice thing about having them up front, one that I know, is that I can kind of incorporate the thought of that title into the chapter,
Mhm.
whether it's whatever the forward motion is, or something deeper, maybe about an emotion or a relationship.
I think it should be interesting then, if you're in a book group, to go back and read the chapter title at the end and have that as part of your discussion of this is the mechanics of what the author is doing with the book. It's not just the prose. There's a reason why all this is happening.
And
And
I
I
and
think
I
that's
do think
interesting.
in ways, it helps the reader too. I mean, it sets a little like, oh, where you just start thinking, what could that mean? And that you're not, I don't want people to be reading for that meaning, but it does set a tone for when you start the chapter, I think.
And you don't know whether you can see if it's going to be violent, you can see if it's going to be supercharged, or we're just moving along a path. And a lot of times the story has to move along the path. It can't be action, action, action. And you're moving us through the
Or
story.
it's yeah, more interior of
Right.
what's happening to the people, and so that's where to me it's more of that interior landscape and how you know, which is always kind of hard to talk about, right?
Mhm.
But to help just set the stage, if you will.
And it's that moment where Moon is much older and she's looking back, and she's seeing it through different eyes because she's lived through it and gone through it. And that safety factor is there once again, where you can't write that same way when you're in that moment. It's
Right.
too
I
much.
felt it was real. You asked earlier, you know, did I always think it was going to be three characters or one? And originally, I thought I'd be writing it completely from Moon's point of view. I really felt that I needed to have someone who could look back and have perspective on what happened. Because you know, when we're living things day to day, we don't always have perspective. We're
Hmm.
just trying to get through. You
Hmm.
know?
Yep,
And
you're
then later you can look back and say, oh, you know, I understand that in a way that I didn't at the time.
yeah,
Or here were other larger things going on that I really didn't understand at the time. So she has that ability. And the other thing, which I just felt was really important, and it's just in her very first scene, where she's like, you know, it's hard to remember what Los Angeles was like.
yeah, yeah.
And she talks about what it's like in 1926. There's radio, there's airplanes, there are trains, there are, you know, over 1 million people living here, and half of them have cars, the movie palaces, huge hotels.
Mhm.
I think, I mean, and maybe this was just me, but I think we all have it in our heads a perception of what Los Angeles is like.
Hmm.
And, you know, you do think of Hollywood from the beginning. And, but this is so far before that, any of that. You know, if it's only 5,000 people, it's San Francisco by comparison, 150,000 people.
Yeah.
So it was just like a little dinky Western town like you'd see in the movies, except nobody did that movie.
Mm-mm.
You know, no one's done that movie of the Wild West in Los Angeles. And so that I just felt that I needed to have a way to say this is not what you might be thinking Los Angeles was like, that's not what it was. This is before any of that.
It was one tiny movie set. It was not the whole thing. It was not a whole town. It was just this little set, and you could see the dusty roads and the going back and forth of what's happening. I just think it's so interesting because it's that time that okay, you live in this place now, and you know what it's like. It could take you an hour to get someplace or 15 minutes.
At least.
I mean, that's the thing that's always surprised me. I remember one time we were coming back and it was like 2 a.m. and we were on the 5 and we're coming down and there are all these cars. And I said, do people just get up in the morning and drive to San Francisco and then drive back? Like, who are all these people that are out right now that we're in a traffic jam at midnight? Like, what is happening? And I know you've often talked about, well, if I have to go across town, it could take an hour. It could take whatever. Yeah. Lots of audiobook time listening in the car. Lots of it. Lots of it. You know?
Exactly.
So was the title always Daughters of the Sun and Moon?
Yes,
Right from the
I
beginning.
think
Wow.
so.
That's a great title. It's really
Oh, was it? I don't remember now.
okay, we'll go with it was.
Yeah, I'll have to go with what, because I was just all of a sudden I was thinking about Lady Tan, and that is still in my computer as Doctor of Women, which was a terrible title, but that's still how it is in my computer. But I think this was always this title.
Yeah, this one really, it really, really works. Was the cover always like this, or did you play with it for a while?
Oh my gosh, they tinkered quite a bit. I didn't realize this kind of goes with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
know. This is exactly. I'm
uh,
looking for that. I didn't know.
It's just the most gorgeous jacket. And she originally was holding a loom. She's weaving. I was like, well, there's no weaving in this book. Can you take the loom out? You know, can you take the spindle and all of that stuff? So she's kind of in a strange position, but just imagine she's holding a spindle
Okay.
and there's a loom down there.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, I don't know if it's the most beautiful jacket of all of my books, but it sure feels like it.
It's also compelling when I see it up on the shelf because remember, I have books all over the place here. It just jumped out because it's different. It's different from, every cover that's out there.
And also that pink, it
Mhm.
looks pink from where I'm sitting right now,
Yes, it
but
is.
it's this very wonderful color. And they made it look like parchment or no, linen, linen. They were trying to get a like a linen effect.
Yeah, it definitely works. Definitely works. The flowers on top, it's just beautiful. And it's also a woman that's looking. The way her gaze is on her face is important as well. So I know you love listening to audiobooks. You enjoy them a lot. So the audio is narrated by Jennifer Lim, who also did Lady Tan. But we also have an ensemble cast of, let me see if I could do it, Kwano Luo Masterson and Emily Wu Zeller, and you. So
And
have
me.
you had a chance to hear any of the audio yet?
Just a tiny bit. They sent a clip of me, which of course I'm like, hey, nobody likes to hear themselves. But yeah, I have heard a clip from the very beginning of the book.
Okay.
And they'll send me more, they'll send me more.
Ready.
It's funny, I love audiobooks, as you know, I just love audiobooks, but it's hard for me to listen to my books
Mhm.
on audio because I have a very different voice in my head of the characters. Not that they don't do a great job, they do this beautiful job, but I will have spent 2 or 3 years with a very particular voice that I hear.
Right.
And I don't even know how you would capture that.
No, it's like this, you're
But
hearing.
they've done such a great
Oh,
job. And then I was really thrilled to get to read the author's note at the end where I talk about how I came to the story, some of the research, what happened to people in real life, some of the other sort of secondary characters like the Judge
hmm.
Whitney, who again was a real person and the first real estate agent in Los Angeles. He was the head of the vigilante group, but he saved a bunch of people on the night of the massacre, and then testified at the grand jury, and then ended up being the judge. How could that happen?
Yeah,
And then last, he was one of the founders of USC. So he was a real character, just a
yeah,
real, very interesting person. And the other thing is that this town was so small that almost everybody there ends up becoming sheriff or mayor or vice mayor over time.
right.
And it's just, I guess, such a small pond. Everybody got to be something.
Yeah. Our town is small, and you go from being the mayor, the deputy mayor, then you go be this other person. It's very funny. It's like the same clique is going around doing things, the same groups. So you're going on a very extensive tour for this book, very extensive. And I think one of the things you love is meeting readers, and I know they love meeting you. What do you enjoy about going on book tour? What's the best thing about it for you?
Well, watching Law and Order SVU in my hotel room and having room service. No, that's not my actual answer, but it is the one that popped in my head. You know, I'm so lucky that the the readers of my books are so smart and so interested and curious. And what I love is, I give my talk, but then I always do a Q&A.
Hmm.
And people always ask these fascinating questions, which again tells me how um, connected they are to the story and what they're thinking about. And I learn a lot. I learn a lot about what I'm doing from them.
What your takeaway is. And it's different at the beginning of the tour because they haven't often read the book. And as
Right.
time goes on, you're getting questions based on, you're on the road for 6 weeks. Usually about week two, it changes.
Yeah. Yeah. People will have often read it ahead of time, and then they ask these really tough questions like, we'll just go back to how long would it take to walk from here to there? Or how long is it on a horse? And then I have to try to remember. But that people ask really interesting things.
Yeah.
And um, that also pushes me actually to dig deeper
Hmm.
every time. And the other thing is people feel very, I think they do kind of connect to the emotional aspects of my novels. And so
Hmm.
often people come through the line and then they get to me and they burst into tears, when some terrible thing has happened.
Hmm.
Um, and I learn a lot from that
Yeah. Yeah.
and how to take that. in, and it inspires me. So, when I wrote Peony and Love, there about those women writers in
Hmm.
17th century China, and there were so many women writers in, and they had this. There was this one group, the Banana Garden Club, kind of like what we think of as a book club, except they were a writing group, and they had this belief that you have to cut to the bone to write.
Mm.
And I really believe that. I mean, you can't just sort of skim along the surface. You have to cut to the bone. And when I meet with readers, it makes me, pushes me to,
Get to that
to do
bone.
that.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I mean, I'm not going to say writing is as hard as laying asphalt on a summer day. It's not. But there are parts of it that are emotionally hard,
Hmm.
and that they give me the courage and the push to keep cutting, to keep going.
To keep going deeper, keep going deeper. And you're gonna do this and then you're gonna make dinner. Or you're gonna do this, you're gonna
Well, there's that.
do this. And then you're sitting there like, whoa, whoa, I'm still back in the story over here and moving out. Times it happens when I'm reading a book. It's like, wait, I'm so deep into the story that real life kind of suspends. It doesn't really matter quite the same way. So do you know what's next for you? I mean, I hate to ask this, like,
Yes, I've been doing, actually, you can see I've started to build up a
mm,
stack of books there that I need to read. But I've been doing the research for the next book, which has two parallel stories. One is kind of a triangle, actually. All three characters, two women and one man, work as curators at the Forbidden City, the Palace Museum in the Forbidden City.
oh wow.
And this is during the Cultural Revolution, and this is like 2 years down the line. So even though I'm giving a spoiler, no one will remember by then. But during the Cultural Revolution, the museum was closed, and all of the people were sent to a work camp out in the middle of nowhere, and things happened there, which
Yeah.
and then how people got back out and how the museum reopened and all of that. But then and of course, there's a woman in love with the man, and she has a best friend who has some ideas about that guy. So, it's a triangle. But
Yeah.
the other is based on a true story of a musical instrument that was made in 871, and was for the emperor. And it goes through many hands. It's out there in the world. It has many, many adventures. And today it is back at the Palace Museum.
Mm.
And so this is a story, whether, both of them being parallel, of love, separation, and reunification.
Mm. Wow. We have to wait how long?
Yeah, well, I got to get back from the book tour
Oh,
before
and
I can
finish up
really
the book
start
tour.
writing.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this will be airing in a couple of weeks. I hope that everybody does get a chance to go out to see Lisa if you're nearby. It's always a wonderful evening. And every time I go, I walk away with some new knowledge that I didn't have before. And I think it's really important. What you were saying is history does repeat itself, but how can we change things? What can we do looking back? And reading about something like this that isn't taught now in California history, it's not spoken about, it's swept under the rug. It's really important to be
But
thinking about
also, even American history, it should be a
everywhere.
part of our American history.
Yeah. And it's, and especially, since it's after the Civil War, it's after we always ever fought for freedom. Okay, wait, only freedom for some people, not for
Right.
everyone. Very, very interesting story. Lisa, as always, it's so much fun. It's always so much fun. It's fun figuring
Always.
out the questions. It's fun figuring out where we're going to go from here. So, wish you much luck on your tour. I'm looking forward to seeing you along the way. And then from there, when you get back to your desk, I can just imagine you going through those books and learning. I do have a hot tip though on the room service that I learned from an author. She said when you're on your way back to the hotel, call and order the room service to go
Oh, that's a great
through.
idea. Then it's waiting for you.
That is waiting for you. She said that is her hot tip. Besides carrying one suitcase, which means you've seen my luggage. I could never travel. Like I could never do this. But yeah, she said you
I'm
order.
on the road for however long you said with one carry-on.
I know. I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. Showing up with 4 suitcases, I'll never forget it. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And to everybody
Thank
else, look
you.
forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Lisa.